Good evening and welcome to another edition of Police Facts. I'm Chief Bob Champagne of the Peabody Police Department, welcoming tonight's guest, Carrie Kimball Moynihan from the District Attorney's Office and our District Attorney, Jonathan Blodgett. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about some things in the cyber world and also on the idea of cyberbullying. This has been a topic that's been in the press of recent date. As always, our District Attorney here in Essex County, John Blodgett, really taken the lead on a lot of things in the areas of education and prevention. He's here tonight to talk to us about some things that we can do to protect ourselves and more particularly to protect our children and our grandchildren. So we're here tonight. John, thank you for coming.
Chief.
Carrie, thank you very much for coming and
Thanks
welcome
for
to
having
Police
me.
Facts. This is your first time here.
It
John's
is.
John's sort of a regular guest that's on here.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll start with you. My understanding is today you put on a big opening presentation on some cyber issues that were out there and cyber bullying, some things that innovative programs that the district attorney's doing here in Essex County and perhaps statewide. Can you talk a little bit about what it is that you're doing?
Sure. We developed a program. It's called Think Before You Send, and the tagline is using digital communication responsibly. And it's an interesting kind of evolution in that way back when District Attorney Blodgett was first elected in 2003, there was a series of attempted lurings in the county, and we developed kind of a casual internet safety program for parents. And over the time since 2003 until now, it has changed so dramatically in what we're talking about, and we can't even call it internet anymore because it's digital communication. It's your cell phone, it's the iPod or the iPad or whatever it's called, and all those devices that communicate, that people, young people in particular, use to communicate. Now there's a whole new world of how we use these things safely. So this program that we put together, and it's about to be officially released, it helps address all those topics.
So, John, this is your sort of brainstorm here that sort of came up with her, and I've seen sort of the outline of it, but can you talk to us a little bit about what it is that you're there? I mean, the background is the world is changing and the way that we communicate is changing.
Well, the world's certainly changing, Chief, and I want to get back to initially the point Carrie made, which she talked about. We had some cases of luring. Those were child enticement cases that we had throughout the county in which perpetrators who were hiding behind the so-called anonymity of a computer were using that computer to try to lure for their own criminal purposes, certainly sexual purposes if they were successful, children into their lair, for lack of a better word. And we had some successful prosecutions based on the new child enticement statute because of that. Carrie's right, the changes, the rapid evolution of electronic means of communication has been so fast, so rapid, so widespread that we've seen what's happened now with the real topical issue of the day, cyberbullying or bullying, and the presentation that Carrie's put together is doing, Think Before You Send, tries to address some of the things, particularly for young people, that we want them to be aware of in terms of what can happen to you, the accountability, the possible criminal culpability if you send things out before understanding what you're doing and thinking about it beforehand.
So, Carrie, can you talk to us expand a little bit about sort of exactly what it is that we're trying to caution people about?
Well, I think the thing, the primary message is that these devices have made it such that any message that you send, whether it's a text, an IM, a post on your Facebook,
An IM being an instant message for us old folks.
right, which is kind of an antiquated way of communicating now that we have texting and cell phones, but but all of those ways in which we use an electronic device to communicate, people think that those are that's private. And it really isn't. It really can be made public very easily. And I think the whole meaning of the word private has changed. So what we hope to have young people be aware of, again, we started from trying to protect them from being the victim of a predator. Now we're trying to continue to protect them from that, but also to protect them or educate them so they don't become the perpetrator of a crime by sending messages to classmates or whomever they may be angry at them, or they may, whatever the case may be, and say some things because they don't have to say it directly to their face, but they're just typing away, they tend to go over the line legally a lot more easily.
And that what might be just for the sake of, I'll kill you, I'll strangle you, I'll do
Yeah,
these sort
you
of
better watch
things
out,
that kids
or-
sort of say to each other.
Yeah,
Many times face to face when the emotions are high, but they really have no intent to sort of do that when you observe it. Now,
Right.
when you put this out in writing, it becomes a whole different vehicle, doesn't it?
that's correct. And right, or they'll make a derogatory comment about someone's race or religion in a context of saying something like that, like you better watch out, or you better leave this kid alone, or whatever it is, and then it has that element of a threat.
So this whole idea of this sort of new communication is at least as much about what the reader perceives as well as the sender perceives.
Exactly correct.
A big gray area there.
Yeah, and without tone of voice, facial expression, body language, any of those other things that are part of the way that we communicate when we're sitting here like this,
Right.
when you have it just a typewritten message, a lot gets lost and a lot can be misinterpreted also.
And Carrie makes a very good point. The nuance in with respect to back in 2003 of a young person being a victim, and now that same young person today being perhaps a perpetrator, is something we try to make sure isn't lost upon parents or particularly the students. This last month, there's been great change in the law. The governor signed the anti-bullying law, which puts a lot of responsibility and onus on school departments, school systems to do things. Just a couple examples: create an anti-bullying plan, put it in a student handbook, do a yearly prevention plan, and that was born obviously from the South Hadley situation with Phoebe Prince, which was terribly horrific. But also we've had situations here where kids set up phony Facebook pages, say there's somebody they're not, maybe not understanding the consequences, and then as it gets out of control, you could be charged with threats. The new criminal harassment statute, which is a restraining order, analogous to a 209A, where unlike a restraining order where you have to have a family relationship, a substantial dating relationship, someone living in the same household, could actually be among strangers, that if you continue to do that, you can be guilty of criminal harassment and stalking. It takes 3 separate incidents. Those 3 separate incidents could be in an hour's time, and then a threat accompanying that puts you into the stalking phase of potential criminal culpability. So there's a whole host of new laws and consequences for people who abuse or misuse electronic communications. And we've seen it. I mean, we had a case up in another part of the county, high profile, 3 kids set up a phony Facebook page, claimed there's somebody they weren't, threatened other kids, thought it was funny, but violated Chapter 265, and were held accountable for that. People are doing this to intimidate people, harass people, and whether it's bad divorces or attempting to create identity theft to steal someone's funds. It has a whole host of culpability potential in terms of a whole myriad of crimes that we have to be aware of, and that's what we're trying to do in terms of raising that awareness.
So one of the hallmarks of your administration has been educating people so that they don't make mistakes, and the other thing is doing things to prevent those sorts of crimes. Now what you're talking here is the sort of the education component. At least my perception is, gee, we're going to teach kids, we're going to teach adults, we're going to teach. What do we say? And a lot of folks we have here, a lot of parents and grandparents tend to watch this show. And I guess I pose the question to each of you in the idea that we caution the youngsters who are a lot faster with their thumbs and know how to use all of this technology than I know I am, okay? But what do we do to educate the parents here on these sorts of things about what to be cautious of, or what to look out for, or what to sort of, how to help educate their own children, or hold them accountable, or things like that?
Well, one of the things that I often say when I make presentations is I compare it to a motor vehicle in the sense that, you know, obviously life is much more convenient because we have motor vehicles, but I've yet to meet a parent who will hand car keys to a 16-year-old and wish them luck. You're going to teach them how to drive, whether you do it yourself or pay for the classes. The difference being, of course, as parents, as adults, we all know how to drive, and we've been driving for a long time, so we feel comfortable discussing the rules with our children and you know, sort of being authority on that. Whereas with all this technology, we don't have that same comfort zone. And what I try to emphasize, and I use my own experience with this, is I have a 13-year-old daughter, and she has a phone, and she can text very quickly. It takes me a very long time to text. I'm not that good at it. I often ask her to do the texting for me if I have to send a text. But the point is, even though she knows how to do it better than I do, it doesn't mean she knows better than I do. And the rule is, if you've got a phone, I get to see it. And I get to look, you know, it's right in there, menu, messages. Look at those messages. See what kinds of messages are going back and forth. Most of it, I think you'll find, is pretty mundane. You know, what are you doing? And what are you wearing tomorrow? Whatever. But you never know. And also look at the photographs that are stored on the phone. My Pics is where you'll find them. And you can see what kind of photographs your child is taking or receiving from a friend. And that, you don't need to know much to know how to do that. And to have the conversation with your child that the reason you're doing that has to do with their safety. You're not trying to snoop or be nosy, but you're just trying to make sure they're
There are some of
safe.
us that say it's okay to be snoopy and nosy.
Well,
if you're a parent.
I think so, but
And this isn't about Big Brother, and
No.
I get that sometimes. This is about trying to help people raise awareness. We don't tell anyone how to be a parent or what to do. What we really try to do is say there are consequences for this type of behavior in terms of what happens. Now, you make your own decisions, but we tried to help kids in particular make good decisions, because it's a bad day for me, and I've had a lot of these days where I have a parent say to me, "Oh, I didn't know," or "I wish I had known," and it could be the opiate abuse epidemic we're dealing with, underage drinking, teen dating violence, which is on the rise, all these issues that we just think it's important to try to be out in the community and give the information so that, again, adults can have those discussions with their children, and kids in particular hopefully have a raised awareness. And we do these in the schools. Last 2 years, we've had a whole spate of these incidents. I know you had to deal with them, Chief. And a perfect example, Facebook page. Kids taking pictures at a party, keg party, and now 15 kids are no longer eligible because of MIAA and school rules for sports.
Right.
And it causes great consternation in the schools and with parents. But as Carrie said, you know, I think some parents take the lead and make sure they know what's on their children's Facebook pages and look at the pictures and insist on having the password, or maybe sometimes saying, okay, it's 10 o'clock and I'm paying for the cell phone or the computer. Yeah, exactly.
Shut it off.
Yeah, and so that's up to the parents themselves to work those issues out with their kids. But again, now there are crimes with some severe penalties associated with violation of a criminal harassment statute, up to 2.5 years in the House of Correction, or certain consequences for the bullying statute that could follow you through college, potential civil remedies. We just want to provide the tools, and we have it on our website through the internet, to say, here's what's going to happen, or here's the consequences for breaking the new laws or not using the computer, which I've been on this show before and said, it's obvious the computer's become the gun of this millennium. Yep. And if you do it on the computer and you think that it's anonymous or anonymity is going to be forever, you're wrong. And you got to, again, through our program, think before you send.
Mm. So I guess to that end, and I really sort of want to focus a lot more on, or continue with this sort of idea of prevention. Mm-hmm. Are there some suggestions that you can make to parents or grandparents to how to initiate the conversation, or with the child, and sort of, because sometimes kids can be kids and they're like, oh, I'm the only kid in America that doesn't get to keep their cell phone all. I hear it over and over and over again about the issues of cell phones in schools, which we believe are great communication devices, but school's a place of learning. And
Exactly.
so you're supposed to be focused on something else.
Right.
And the obvious issues of cell phones and cars and driving and all those are separate
Yeah.
issues. But to the extent that how does someone start a conversation with a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old about these sorts of things and be on the same level? Because the kids are a lot smarter than most of us are with all this technical stuff.
Yeah, they are, and I mean, believe me, my 13-year-old was the last 13-year-old in America to receive a cell phone, according to her. So, so you're going to hear that no matter what you're saying, and that's, I think, part of the job. But some of the things that I've read and have heard from other folks who do a lot more work in this area than I do is about, you know, before your child has a cell phone, you have a great opportunity to create the rules associated with it and create expectations. And so before you hand it over, again, a lot of the research says a lot of kids will say, my parents never gave me a rule, they just handed it to me. Well, it is like handing car keys without a rule. So think about that before you give it to them. There should be a charging station in the family, maybe, where all phones get turned in at a certain hour, and so that they're not going all night long. You know, we always caution people about having computers in, you know, now with wireless and
Public
I mean,
spaces, yeah.
You don't need a whole computer. You can just have the iPad or whatever it is, but just monitoring that kind of thing, asking to see it, checking on it, but talking. I think, unfortunately, there's going to be always an opportunity to bring it up based on something that's happened in the news. There's going to be some bad thing that happens to a young person somewhere in the country about that has to do with the computer or the texting, and that's a chance. I remember when Phoebe Prince, when that occurred, I sat my daughters down and I said, you need to tell someone. If something like this is happening to you or to someone you know, you need to tell someone. And we talked about the reasons why kids wouldn't share, and you kind of can get them going. And sometimes I say, well, if you know, you tell me, what do you know about this? And get them to tell you. I know a mom who just had her daughter set up a Facebook page, and she said, can you show me how this works? And you can do that, because what do kids like better but to tell their parent, you know, they do know better than us, they think they do, and get them talking about why is it that I want to use this, or what is fun about it, and then say, do you see how this could be a problem? I went on Facebook and showed my daughter somebody who had over 1,000 friends. I said, do you see why that's a problem? Do you see how she could be putting her future, she's not breaking any rules, she's not breaking any laws, she's not going to get arrested, but I'm looking at this young lady as a potential babysitter, say, for my family, or maybe an intern in the DA's office, and she's a very, very accomplished young woman, but she has some things on there that make me think twice about her judgment. And I show those to my kids and say, you know, what do you think? Do you think, what would you think of this person, you know, as a babysitter?
You raise a lot of sort of issues in the conversation, and I sort of, one of the things that I sort of picked up on is the idea of the intervention. Tell someone about this. In this business of policing, we are always studying what are those sort of triggering mechanisms that make things go bad, and what are things that stop things and make them sort of take an about face and go in the right direction. And there seems to be some correlation, at least, with someone saying, hey, no, stop it. You know, now oftentimes we'd hope that it's a responsible adult that's around, that thus we have teachers and policemen and district attorneys that say, hey, no, there's no more of that nonsense that's going to happen here today. Can we talk a little bit about that in this idea of people getting themselves into the goo with text messaging, think before you send, or cyberbullying, or any of those things? I mean, the idea that intervention at some way, particularly by peers, might be a way to, if not stop this, to surely slow it down, to set sort of a tone amongst that responsible behavior here is really what the norm should be. I think everybody's in favor of using all this new technology. It makes life so much better.
Sure.
In a lot of ways. You sort of never seem to get away from the rope, but nonetheless, it does make life a lot better for you. how do we sort of encourage those sorts of things, or am I just completely off track because I'm old and a policeman?
Well, you're both of those, Chief. Well, the intervention part comes with the education. I mean, that's the whole thing here. And we use examples of people who've suffered injuries because of the, again, proliferation of electronic means of messaging. We had 2 examples this month in Essex County of families that lost, had their homes broken into, not just one family, but a couple of family members, because a family member on Facebook said, you know,
We're not going to be
sisters
here
get-
at such and
well,
such
my
a
sister's
time.
getting married at
Yeah.
this church at 2 o'clock, and you know, and it's going to be great, and there's a reception afterwards, and you know, 2 homes were burglarized because it was out there for the world that there was going to be nobody home. You know, underage drinking parties being put in the, you know, in the platter for school officials and law enforcement because of the pictures of kids,
Yeah.
you know, doing what kids will do at an underage drinking party. We've solved a couple crimes, assaultive behavior crimes, because 6 months later, the perpetrators went on Facebook and bragged about it. You know, it's an admission. It's same as saying it verbally to a police officer. It's an admission of culpability. So we have to use many times the examples that come up in that regard for the intervention, but it's just really, the challenge is really trying to help schools and kids understand, again, what those consequences are. I use this example when I speak to different groups about, you know, when I was fortunate enough to first get elected district attorney, I would drive to work over in Salem, and there was a bus stop on Bridge Street, and there'd be a gaggle of kids, 10, 15 kids. Now this was 2003, and they'd be throwing a Nerf football, kicking around, kicking the can. Now when I drive by in the morning, there's 14 kids, everybody has their head down, and they're doing this, waiting for the bus.